Hi, and welcome to The Traveling Fool, the show where we explore the most intriguing aspects of travel, culture, and history. I'm your host, Bob Bales, and today's episode is all about becoming a modern-day explorer, uncovering hidden history and surprising adventures that the guidebooks won't tell you about. We're not talking Eiffel Tower selfies or Times Square hot dogs here. This is about digging deeper, finding the stuff that makes travel real. I've got tips, tales, and a bit of grit to share. So grab a drink, settle in, and let's explore. All right, picture this. I'm in a tiny Czech town called Pilsen. Not Prague, mind you, but close by. I went there specifically to visit the Pilsen brewery, where they invented Pilsner beer and had been brewing beer since 1842. So I'm sipping a beer at the bar at the brewery with a local who, after finding out I'm an American, tells me about a museum in town dedicated to General George S. Patton. So just having a drink with someone and I find out about a military museum I've never heard of, dedicated to a U.S. general that's located in a foreign country. Now that's the kind of travel I live for, finding the hidden, the overlooked, the surprising. And today I'm going to show you how to do it too. We'll cover 5 tips to turn you into a modern-day explorer with some examples to help spark your next trip. Are you ready to ditch the obvious? Well, let's get started. All right, let's kick us off with tip number 1. Look beyond the big names. If there's one thing I've learned, is that you don't need the Colosseum or Big Ben to find the good stuff. Although I love visiting those type of sites. But history isn't just in the postcard spots. It's hiding in the cracks in the back alleys. You know, the places where the tour buses don't bother to stop. And trust me, those little cracks and hidden away places, that's where the real stories live. Unpolished and worth every minute of you digging them up. See the big names, your Eiffel Towers, Grand Canyons. Well, they're fine, sure. But they're loud, they're crowded, and they're just polished to death. They exist for tourists. You're elbowing through selfie sticks just to get a look at something you've already seen on Instagram or Facebook 1,000 times. Well, that's not exploring, that's just checking off the boxes. Me, I'd just rather wander around and explore the area. Somewhere like Bandera, Texas. I visited that cowboy town, and while everyone was piling into San Antonio for the Alamo and the Riverwalk, Bandera's sitting there just a few miles up the road with its saloons, little museum filled with all kinds of stuff from days gone past, and a frontier vibe that hits you like a good slug of bourbon. I mean, it's not screaming for attention up there, and that's why it's gold. It's those places that you need to dig out. I remember driving up to Bandera one summer morning. I wasn't there for any kind of glossy tour. I just wanted to go check the place out. And by the time I got there, I wanted something to drink. So I found this bar called the 11th Street Cowboy Bar. It's really cool. It's all weathered wood, neon signs. It's even got a hitching post outside for horses. Well, I got a Shiner Bock, which is one of our local Texas beers. And I asked, what around here should I go visit that a lot of people don't know about or that the tourists often miss? And the waitress told me, she said, well, if you like history, the Frontier Times Museum is right down the road. She told me it's a little funky, cool little spot with old saddles, rusty guns, and tells about cattle drives and all the local history. So I drove over to check it out, and there were no lines, no hype. It's just me and a window into Texas past. And the people there were real friendly and gave you a little bit more detail and would tell you stories about the local area. Well, that's the kind of history I'm chasing, not stuff that's in a gift shop. So how do you pull this off? Well, first, ditch the must-see lists online. Those little clickbait articles, the ones that are written by folks who never even leave their cubicles. You want a real deal, you got to go straight to the source. Next time you're in a new spot, find you a bartender, a gas station clerk, hell, even some old guy sitting on a bench, and just casually ask him, what's the coolest thing around here that I should see that nobody knows about. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to spill something better than anything you're going to find on some travel app. Might be a rusted out jailhouse where some outlaw cooled his heels for a while, or a forgotten battlefield with bullet scars still in the trees. I mean, these folks live there. They know where the secrets are that the tourist board is sometimes too busy to notice. Take Pilsen, Czech Republic. Like I said, not Prague, but Pilsen, close by. Everyone's clogging into Prague's Charles Bridge and the castle, but while visiting Prague, I took a train ride to Pilsen. So I'm sitting there drinking a beer with a guy who looks like he's been a regular at that bar forever. I asked him the same question. What's something really cool around here that a lot of tourists and people that visit just don't know about? So he sends me to this museum where the only way you could find it is a sign up high on the building on the 2nd story saying Patton Memorial Museum. Now, the museum was fantastic. It was started by a local guy who began collecting memorabilia as a kid. He told me he wanted to open up that museum because when the Czech Republic was under control of the Russians told everybody that they had liberated the country from Hitler during World War II, when it was General George Patton and the U.S. Third Army, and he wanted everyone to know that. He and I had a good conversation. In fact, when I was up there, I was the only one walking around in his museum. And he found out I was American, and we got to talking. And come to find out, I was in the army in Germany at the same time he was in the Czech army, but serving on East German side of the border. And we were there at the same time, probably looking at each other every now and then. But it was a great museum, and from talking to him, I asked him the same question, and he pointed me to the city's catacombs and told me where to go at this little door, basically, next to one of the shops downtown. He said, if you knock on that door, there's going to be a lady answer, and she'll take you down in the catacombs. Now, how cool is that? You're not going to find that in the guidebooks. So here's the trick. Don't overthink it. You don't need a PhD in history or some fancy guidebook. Just a willingness to wander around and talk to people. Next time you're tempted by some shiny brochure, just turn the other way. Hit a side street, step into some dive bar, follow that little dirt road that looks like it's going nowhere. And don't be afraid to look stupid. I've asked dumb questions plenty of times, but they've landed me in spots like at Pilsen Museum or a London pub having drinks with locals talking about Lily Langtry, known as the Jersey Lily. History's everywhere, folks. You got to cut through that slick tourist gloss like it's clutter in your gear bag. It's a grind sometimes, but, the raw stuff you uncover is what makes the trip. So that's tip number 1. Look beyond the big names, skip the hype, talk to locals, and chase the stuff that doesn't come with a hashtag. Whether it's some little cowboy town like Bandera or a museum in Pilsen, the best adventures are the ones you stumble into and not the ones everybody's already going to. You'll thank me later when you're sipping something cold in a place nobody's ever heard of. All right, let's dive into tip number 2. Chase local legends. Forget the sanitized plaques and overpriced audio tours. Finding the legends is a whole lot more fun than anything you'll dig up on some top 10 list. And today, I'm going to show you how to do it. Here's the deal. Legends outshine tourist traps every time. You don't need a museum with a velvet rope to tell you what went down. Those stories are too neat, too polished. I'm talking about the untamed stuff, something like the ghost in the old mill or some outlaw who vanished into the hills. The tales that bounce around over the bar stools and when you're sitting there drinking coffee in some place. That's history with a pulse. It's tied to places where you can still walk through and feel. Chasing legends isn't just about the story, it's about the hunt. Getting off the main drag and into the heart of a place. That's where the real adventure lives. And it beats standing in line for a photo with some overhyped statue any day of the week. So, how do you find these places? Well, it's not complicated. First, you just get rid of the guidebooks. You're starting to see a pattern here, aren't you? They're too busy hyping the obvious to bother with things like these. You got to go straight to the folks who know the place inside and out. The locals. I told you, we got a pattern going on. Find a diner or even some old guy sitting there drinking coffee and just ask him, what kind of wild story has this place got? What unusual history happened here? And they'll tell you something about a haunted bridge or a stash of gold, and then just go see for yourself. That's your pass to the real deal. Sometimes a legend isn't a person, but a place. I'll tell you about a time I chased a legend worth chasing. At least I thought it was. You can call it the day I went to prison. So I'm in the Philippines on the island of Palawan. Now, Palawan had a Japanese prisoner of war camp that was notorious during World War II. And when General MacArthur was getting ready to return to the Philippines, the Allies were flying bombing runs over the island. The Japanese made the decision to execute the prisoners before the Allies returned. So one day the guards blew the air raid sirens and they herded all the prisoners in these little makeshift bunkers. They rode gasoline barrels onto the entrances and set them ablaze. Over the next few hours, while the prisoners were attempting to escape, the guards chased them down and killed them. The camp, now, it sits on the edge of a bay, and during the carnage, 139 prisoners were killed, while 11 managed to escape by swimming across the bay, and they were rescued by prisoners of a Philippine prison called the Prison Without Walls. The Filipinos managed to help them escape POWs, get back to some Allied lines, and once word got out about the massacre, the Allies were in a rush to free other POW camps around the country, and that led to the successful liberation of the POW camp at Cabanatuan, where U.S. Army Rangers, along with Philippine scouts, liberated 489 POWs, along with 33 civilians. It's considered the most successful rescue raid in U.S. military history. Today, the site in Palawan, where the POW camp was, is a park. And when I heard that the Prison Without Walls is still in operation, well, that's the kind of story that sticks with you, so I had to visit it. So I asked around to various trike taxi drivers. If you don't know what that is, it's a motorcycle with a sidecar, basically. You sit in the sidecar and he takes you around. And I was asking these guys who could take me to the prison, and I run across a guy that tells me he knows someone in the prison and can get me in. He said he knows that a former high-ranking Philippine police officer is in prison for murder. He says, yeah, I know the guy, and we can go visit. So it gets better and better, doesn't it? So I get in a little trike, get in the sidecar, and he takes me on this 20-minute drive at breakneck speed around the bay, and he's weaving in and out of traffic, making me think that he's going to get us killed any second now. But once we arrive, he tells the guard at the front gate, he said, we need to see this police officer that's jailed for murder. And the guard goes, no, you can't go in. And so he talks to him a little bit more and comes back to me and he says, give the guy $5. So I slip him a couple of dollars and he lets us in. Now they call it the Prison Without Walls because except for prisoners in the maximum and medium security, the rest of the prisoners walk around on their own. And this is over several acres where they're maybe growing rice fields and everything else. And these prisoners just have the run of the place. There's nobody guarding them or anything. And why? Well, because there's really nowhere for them to go. They know they can't go to the airport and catch a flight out. Most of these guys are from other islands, so they have no family there. No one ever comes to visit them there, and that's why they call it the Prison Without Walls. But once I'm in, one of the guards tells me the history of the prison and the role it played in the rescue back in World War II. And I was even allowed to walk around and talk to some of the inmates in the maximum and medium security area. I had to stand there talking to them through some 10-foot-high barbed wire fence, but it was fascinating to talk to these guys. And most were eager to talk to me since they were, like I said, all from other islands and never received any visitors. So not only did I wind up getting stories about the location where a POW massacre took place in World War II, because I'm a big history buff, I also got stories about visiting a Filipino prison. So that's tip number 2. Chase your local legends. It's about skipping the obvious and hunting the wild tales still lurking in the corners. Whether it's a prison in the Philippines or some outlaw hideout nobody's bothered to pin down, these are the threads that tie you to a place. You got to cut through that tourist gloss. It's work sometimes, but that's what makes the trip. So go track one down and come back and tell me about it. Tell me how it was when you found that legend. So that's your second tip to becoming a modern day explorer. We got 3 more tips to go. And as you notice, this is not some professionally rehearsed and edited podcast. This is just me talking to you. So it's a little raw, maybe not quite so polished. Definitely not going to win any awards for being a podcast host. But hey, you get me. So here's tip number 3. We got a pattern going on here, so let's keep it going. Talk to the locals and not the tour guides. Guides are great, but they're scripted, and a lot of them are out of date. Locals, they've got the dirt. I learned this in Southeast Asia. Some fishermen took me to a beach nobody visits, all because I asked him where his favorite spot was. I have gotten some of my best leads by talking to people. People I meet in bars, coffee shops, hotel workers, people in shops and markets, and taxi drivers. Once, while on a trip to Georgetown, Texas, I was staying at this bed and breakfast. And I got to talking with the owner and asked him about places I should visit. Well, he tells me about a town 20 miles away called Wahlberg. And when I visited, it was this little small town. By small, I'm telling you, it had one flashing light in town. I think it's probably grown since then because it's got more popular and people are moving out there. But it was settled by German immigrants, and it had a German restaurant in town that was famous in the area because the food was pretty good, but they also had live music. So a lot of people went out there to that German restaurant. It also had some old bank that was close to the restaurant. It looked like it had been refurbished or something, but it was closed. It hadn't been in business for a while. And it was in Wahlberg that I met a fellow named Ray. Ray owned the gas station in town. Not a gas station, the gas station. There was only one, called Meakin Motors. It looked like something right out of the 60s. Google a picture of a gas station in the 1960s and even the 50s, and that's kind of what this place looked like. And I struck up a conversation with Ray, because when you walked in, there was little areas where they sold honey and some of the local olive oil that is produced there. And so it was a combination little store souvenir shop thing for people to buy local products and gas. So I get in there and I'm talking to Ray, and he tells me about the history of the town and the people that live there. I mean, it just happened naturally. I asked the guy behind the counter, I said, "Do you own this place?" He goes, "No, I'm the son-in-law. The old man sitting there is the owner." And that's when Ray introduced himself and just started talking. He tells me about his 3 longhorn steers that he has, along with some donkeys that he has. He tells me about the old church in town and the cemetery where there was a tree where they hung a horse thief in the 1880s. He also tells me about the bank I passed. He said, "You know, that bank never closed during the Great Depression because no one bothered to tell us. And we didn't know there was a depression until it had been going on for a while. And by that time, well, the bank didn't see any need to close." And the adventure all started by talking to the owner of a bed and breakfast that I was staying at. I got the best tour of that town by Ray. So strike up a conversation and ask, where do you go to get away? It works wonders. They'll spill secrets, hidden trails, dive bars, old ruins, and who knows, you might meet a guy like Ray, and that'll make your day, I'm telling you. So 3 tips down, 2 to go. So let me ask you, what's your trick for finding good places and good stuff when you're traveling? Send me a message on Facebook or email me at thetravelingfool.com. I'd love to hear your stories. And here's tip number 4. Hunt for the quirky and the odd stuff. The weirder, the better. I mean, it's where the best surprises hide. You ever heard of spending the night locked in a Spanish Presidio that was built in 1747? Well, I found one in Goliad, Texas. And how do you track these down? Well, Google. Just put in there weird, strange, unusual, any other descriptive word, and then add hotel or attraction or park in whatever location you're going to. So if you're going to Fort Worth, Texas, Google strange and unusual places to visit in Fort Worth, Texas, or strange and unusual hotels, or hotels that are haunted. You can put in all kinds of good stuff. And also, here we're back to that same theme. Ask some of the locals, what is the strangest thing here? You'll get stuff like abandoned theaters, roadside shrines, or a bar that's in a cave. It's not on the tourist map, but it's pure gold. So that Spanish Presidio I was telling you about, well, I spent the afternoon there. I was walking around the Presidio and taking in the history. Now, see, I knew about Goliad from my Texas history classes growing up in school. In 1836, Colonel James Fannin and his men were headed to San Antonio to reinforce the defenders of the Alamo when they got into a battle with the Mexican forces. Fannin and over 300 of his men were captured and taken to the La Bahia Presidio in Goliad, where Mexican General Santa Anna ordered them to be executed. What came to be known in Texas as the Goliad massacre occurred at the Presidio, and there's a big mass grave located just outside the walls. So while I was there, I learned that you can rent the quarters where the Presidio officers lived and stay the night. The quarters have been updated and modernized, but still keeping the old charm. The quarters have 2 bedrooms, a living room area, a fireplace, along with a kitchen, bathroom, and shower. You get after-hours access to the entire Presidio's inner courtyard through the back door. Nobody there but you. You've got an entire Spanish Presidio all night long. Now, you're not going to find this on any hotel booking site, and since this is a state park, you have to reserve the quarters on the Texas State Parks page. Now, that's the kind of adventure I'm talking about. If you do decide to stay there, word has it, because of all the people that died there, you might see a ghost or two. I don't know, but you never know. So that's tip number 4. Look for quirky and odd things. And tip number 5, follow the back roads. The highways get you there fast, but the back roads get you there deep. I've driven back roads in Texas and other states that lead to ghost towns and roadside joints with some of the best barbecue you'll ever find on Yelp. And how do you do it? Pick a small road off the main route and see where it takes you. Look for signs of life, old barns, rusty bridges, random statues. It's slower travel, but it's where the real world lives. One time I took a back road in Texas and ended up in the town of Cuero, population less than 9,000. Now, at first glance, it's just another small country town in South Texas that people drive through without thinking twice. That is, if they aren't traveling on the interstate or a major highway. Well, I love small towns, and I decided to take a few minutes to drive around and see if I could find something interesting. Well, it didn't take long before I came upon the Chisholm Trail Heritage Museum, housed in an old Knights of Pythias hall that was built in 1903. The building itself is fabulous, but the museum was extra nice. The Chisholm Trail started in South Texas, and it went north, driving cattle to the stockyards and railheads in Kansas. The museum, which I had never heard of, was fantastic, along with the Chisholm Trail story. It told the story about the local area in the 1800s. But that wasn't all. Cuero has 2 other museums. The Cuero Heritage Museum, which is located in a federal building that was built in 1915, and the Pharmacy and Medical Museum of Texas, housed in an old drugstore that the building was built in 1889. So that's 3 interesting and fairly unknown museums, all located in a town that takes about 2.5 to 3 minutes to drive through. They also have a killer barbecue shack named Tilly's. Now, Tilly's is actually a makeshift barbecue stand at a guy's house where he lives, and he started selling barbecue out of it. And some of the best barbecue in South Texas, but known mostly by the locals that live there. Now, that's not in the Lonely Planet. You're never going to find this. That's just plain back road magic. So there's your playbook to become a modern-day explorer. Skip the big names, chase the legends, talk to locals, hunt the odd, and make the back road your You're a travel companion. You got to hit those back roads. It's not about ticking off boxes and saying, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this. It's about finding what's real, what's hidden, what's yours. I mean, history is not just in the museums. It's in the little dive bars and the stories that nobody's telling. So next time you travel, ditch the crowd and dig in. You'll be amazed at what you uncover. One surprise I've learned, the best adventures often come when you're lost. Not GPS lost, but I've got no clue where this road goes lost. That's when you stumble into the good stuff, like a prison in the Philippines or a barbecue shack at some guy's house. Embrace the detour, folks. That's your ticket to the unexpected. So that's it for today's episode. Again, I'm Bob Bales, the Traveling Fool. I'm going to go have a cigar and maybe drink a bourbon. If you like this episode, hit me up on thetravelingfool.com. Drop a review wherever you're listening. And tell me your hidden gem stories. I might share them next time. But until next time, safe travels and keep exploring.